Behind the concrete walls of Dodge Correctional Facility, something absolutely chilling has been unfolding. The man who destroyed his entire family in cold blood, Chris Watts, has allegedly been receiving visits from mysterious individuals. Prison staff report these visitors aren't appearing on any official lists, yet somehow security waves them right through. Some inmates are whispering about connections to organized crime. Others believe there's a well-funded private organization keeping him protected, ensuring certain truths never surface. But here's where things get interesting. A brand new prison administration just took control, and they've immediately shut down every single one of these shadowy meetings. No more unexplained visitors. No more closed-door conversations. Which raises the haunting question: who exactly were these people, and what information were they so desperate to keep Chris Watts from revealing to the world? Before we go any deeper into this nightmare, I need you to pause for just a moment. Think about Shanann Watts, Bella, Celeste, and Nico, the unborn child who never got to take a breath. These beautiful souls had their lives stolen in the most unimaginable way. If you're watching this, please type "Amen" in the comments to honor their memory. Let their family know the world hasn't forgotten them. They deserve to be remembered not just as victims of a monster, but as the loving people they were. And I want to know where you're watching from. Are you in the States? The UK? Australia? Canada? Somewhere else entirely? Drop your location in the comments, because this story has touched people across the entire globe, and I want to connect with every single one of you who's searching for truth alongside me. Now, I need to be real with you for a second. My name is Liam Oliver, and I'm a crime analyst here on True Crime Cellblock. But I'm not just someone who studies these cases from a distance. I lost 2 of my own children to murder. 2 beautiful lives were ripped away from me, and that pain, that absolute devastation, it never goes away. It changes you forever. That tragedy is what drives me to do this work. Every single case I investigate, every document I track down, every court filing I request through FOIA, every mile I travel to piece together these stories, it's exhausting. There are days when I want to walk away from all of it. Days when the weight of these victims' stories feels too heavy to carry. But then I remember my children. I remember Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and every other innocent person whose voice was silenced too soon. These victims matter. They matter just as much as my children did. And if I quit, who tells their stories? Who fights to make sure they're not forgotten? That's why I keep going. That's why I'll never stop. Because they can't speak for themselves anymore, but I can speak for them. I appreciate every single one of you who watches, shares, and supports this channel. You might not realize it, but your support means the world to me. It reminds me that I'm not alone in wanting justice and truth for these victims. So thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Now, let's dig into what's really happening with Chris Watts in 2026, because what I've uncovered will shock you. You need to understand something fundamental about how prison actually works. There's an invisible hierarchy inside those walls that most people on the outside never see. At the very top of that structure, you've got the respected inmates. The ones who robbed banks, moved drugs, even some who committed violent crimes. They have status. They have power. They have respect from other inmates. But at the absolute bottom, lower than anyone else in that entire facility, those are the people who harm children. And Chris Watts, he exists in that lowest tier every single day of his miserable life. You remember this case, don't you? August of 2018. A young family vanished without a trace in Frederick, Colorado. The husband appeared on television, standing in front of cameras with tears in his eyes, pleading desperately for anyone to help bring his family home. He looked completely shattered, terrified, like a man whose entire world had just collapsed around him. But every word coming out of his mouth was a calculated lie. Chris Watts knew exactly where his wife and daughters were. He knew because he's the one who ended their lives and hid their bodies. His pregnant wife, Shanann. His innocent little girls, Bella and Celeste, just 4 and 3 years old. All of them gone. Erased. Destroyed by the one person who was supposed to protect them more than anyone else in the world. The entire world watched in absolute horror as the truth slowly emerged. The facade crumbled. The lies unraveled. The monster revealed himself. The trial happened. The media circus eventually packed up and left. Life continued. Everyone moved forward. But here's what they don't tell you. Here's what happens after the cameras stop rolling, after the news cycle moves on to the next tragedy, after the world forgets. What is Dodge Correctional wasn't always a prison facility. Before it housed criminals, it operated as a psychiatric hospital specifically for the criminally insane. And you know who was locked up within those walls? Ed Gein, the serial killer who inspired some of the most terrifying movies ever made, including Psycho and The Silence of the Lambs. Stephen Avery, who you might recognize from the Netflix documentary Making a Murderer, was also held there. This place has held genuine monsters throughout its existence. And now Chris Watts lives among them. But here's what I want you to really think about for a second. Why move him so far away from Colorado? What was actually happening there that we don't know about? Was he attacked? Assaulted by other inmates? Did something violent occur that authorities are covering up? The officials won't provide detailed answers. They stay tight-lipped about the specifics. But the very fact that they felt compelled to transfer him at all tells you everything you need to know. He wasn't safe in Colorado. And apparently they couldn't guarantee his safety there, despite all their resources and protocols. So they shipped him off to Wisconsin. To a maximum security facility in the middle of nowhere. To a place where, theoretically, nobody would know him. Or at least that's what they hoped would happen. As an investigative analyst and someone who's experienced the devastating loss of children to violence, researching this case has been one of the most emotionally difficult things I've ever done. Please, if you're finding value in this investigation, hit that subscribe button. Your support genuinely encourages me to continue bringing you these detailed, thoroughly researched stories about cases that demand our attention. Now let me paint an accurate picture of Chris Watts' daily existence. Imagine opening your eyes every single morning in a tiny concrete cell. Gray walls surrounding you on every side. A metal bed frame with a thin, uncomfortable mattress. A toilet sitting right there in the corner just a few feet from where you sleep. No privacy. No comfort. No escape. You're completely alone. And you'll remain alone, locked in that small space for the next 23 hours straight. That's Christopher Watts' life. Every single day. Without exception. A source with direct knowledge of the prison's operations revealed this about his conditions. His quality of life is extremely low. He's locked down in solitary for 23 hours every day. Left completely alone with nothing but his own thoughts. Every single day. His birthday. Christmas. New Year's. Thanksgiving. Weekends. None of it matters. The same four walls. The same crushing isolation. The same endless hours trapped inside his own head. Another source close to the facility said this. He literally has nothing to do except think. He thinks about what he did. Every single day. He's absolutely tormented by his past actions. By the irreversible mistakes he made. By the lives he destroyed. Now you might be thinking to yourself, good. He deserves exactly that. He deserves to suffer. And maybe you're absolutely right. Maybe that's exactly the punishment someone like him has earned. But here's the thing about prison that most people don't understand. It's not just about being physically locked up behind bars and walls. It's about who you're locked up with. It's about the constant threat of violence from the people surrounding you every single day. Eddie Nevis, a former inmate who served significant time, knows exactly how the social dynamics work inside prison walls. And he said this about Chris Watts' situation. A lot of guys in there would love to get their hands on him. He murdered 2 little girls who did absolutely nothing to deserve what happened to them. In prison hierarchy, he's the lowest of the low. If the guards weren't constantly watching and intervening, every single person in that place would take a swing at him given the chance. Let that statement really sink in. Even hardened criminals who've committed serious offenses have a code they live by. And people who harm children? They're at the absolute bottom of that code. They're universally despised. Another prison expert stated, Watts will forever be a target of opportunity. What does that mean exactly? It means if anyone gets the chance, if the timing is right, if the guards are distracted for even a moment, they'll take their shot at him. They'll hurt him if they possibly can. And Watts knows this reality intimately. He lives in constant, unrelenting fear. He keeps to himself as much as humanly possible. He avoids conversations with other inmates. He stays locked in his cell whenever he's given the option. Because out there? In the prison yard? In the cafeteria during meals? In the common areas? That's where the danger lives and breathes. That's where violence can erupt in an instant. People who commit crimes against children are the most universally hated individuals inside any prison. That's not just my opinion or speculation. That's documented fact. That's how the system works. Inmates have families on the outside too. Many of them have children of their own. Sons and daughters they love and miss desperately. And when they encounter someone like Chris Watts, someone who murdered his own babies in cold blood, they don't see a fellow human being. They see someone who deserves punishment. Severe, ongoing punishment. Every single day. So Watts walks around that facility every day knowing this truth. Knowing that at any random moment someone could attack him. Knowing that the guards might not reach him in time to prevent serious injury or worse. Knowing that even if they do intervene and stop one attack, it could easily happen again tomorrow. Or the next day. Or the day after that. That's his permanent reality. That's the life he'll live until he takes his last breath. And it's never, ever going to change. You would think someone in Watts' position would keep his head down at all costs. Follow every single rule to the letter. Stay completely quiet and invisible. Avoid any situation that could bring additional trouble or attention. But that's not what actually happened. Chris Watts was formally cited for unauthorized communication with other inmates. He was also written up for unauthorized transfer of property. What does that mean in practical terms? He was breaking established prison rules. Talking to people he wasn't supposed to be communicating with. Giving items and possessions to people he wasn't authorized to give things to. The punishment? He lost all phone privileges for 15 days. No calls to anyone on the outside. He also lost canteen privileges for 30 days. That means no snacks, no treats, no small comforts that make prison life slightly more bearable. But the rule violations didn't stop there. He got written up again. This time the charges were possessing contraband and disobeying direct orders from corrections officers. He lost access to all electronics for 10 days as punishment. But here's where the situation becomes truly bizarre and disturbing. In July, during a routine cell inspection, officers discovered something highly unusual. In another inmate's cell, a guy named Dylan Tallman. They found Chris Watts' personal belongings. His underwear. His books. His toiletries. Even petroleum jelly that belonged to Watts. Why would another inmate have Watts' personal items in his possession? Why would Watts give away his own belongings? When confronted and questioned by prison officials, Watts admitted everything. He confessed that he'd given Tallman his books, his hygiene products, his toothbrush, his shampoo, his bar of soap, his coffee, even his personal underwear. Fruit of the loom boxer shorts that belonged to him. But the situation gets even stranger and more concerning. Watts was also making phone calls. Not to his own family or friends. To Dylan Tallman's family members. He contacted Tallman's mother directly. Multiple times. Multiple phone conversations. He even convinced his own parents to contact Tallman's mother and girlfriend on his behalf. So why would he do something like this? Why develop this strange relationship with another inmate and his family? Think about the psychology here for a moment. Chris Watts is completely isolated. Totally alone. Nobody wants to talk to him. Nobody wants to associate with him in any way. He has zero friends inside that facility. He's desperate for any kind of human connection. Any relationship, no matter how inappropriate or against the rules. He's so starved for basic human interaction that he's willing to violate prison regulations and face punishment just to feel some sense of connection to another person. But that raises another disturbing question. How does someone like Chris Watts wake up every morning? How does he look at himself in the mirror? How does he continue breathing when the crushing weight of what he did is so absolutely enormous? Here's the psychological truth. You tell yourself a different story. You focus on external factors. You spread the responsibility around to other people and circumstances until the guilt becomes something manageable. Something you can live with. And that's exactly what his letters from prison reveal. A man desperately trying to make sense of his own horrific choices. Trying to construct a version of events where he's not pure, irredeemable evil. Where there's some explanation. Some understandable reason. Some outside force that contributed to his actions. Inmates who've interacted with him in Bible study and other programs say he brings this up in conversations. Not constantly. Not in an obvious way that makes people immediately call him out. But little comments here and there. Little hints. If things had been different. If certain people hadn't done certain things. If I'd seen the truth sooner. Always with that little word, if. Like his actions were dependent on other people's actions and decisions. Like he was simply reacting to what others did to him, instead of making his own calculated choices. One former inmate who participated in Bible study alongside Watts said he once tried to address this directly. Asked him point blank about personal responsibility. About completely owning your choices without excuse or explanation. According to this person's account, Chris got extremely quiet. Really quiet. Then he said something along the lines of, "I own what I did, but you have to understand the whole picture." The whole picture. That exact phrase shows up repeatedly in his letters from prison too. Like he's trying to get people to see something they're missing. Some crucial context that would make everything suddenly make sense. But what context could possibly exist? What picture could possibly make his actions understandable or justifiable in any way? That's what makes people so incredibly angry when they read his letters or hear about these conversations. The feeling that he's minimizing what he did. That he's not taking complete, full, 100% responsibility. That even after 7 years locked in a cell, reflecting on his actions every single day, he still doesn't fully get it. He still doesn't completely understand. Or maybe he does get it. Maybe he understands perfectly and completely. And maybe that's exactly why he has to create this alternative narrative. Because understanding and accepting the full weight of what he did would be psychologically unbearable. Some people argue we should have compassion for that internal struggle. That living with what he did is its own unique form of punishment. That beating himself up mentally every single day for the rest of his life serves no constructive purpose. Others argue he doesn't deserve any compassion whatsoever. That he should feel every single ounce of pain, guilt, and remorse possible. That if he's not fully accepting responsibility without excuses, then he hasn't actually changed at all. He's just learned how to manipulate people from behind bars. What do you think? Is it psychologically possible to genuinely regret something terrible while still trying to explain it away or justify it? Or does real, authentic remorse mean accepting everything completely without any excuses or external blame? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. So here we are. 2026. 7 full years into his multiple life sentences. And the question everyone wants definitively answered is simple. Has prison actually changed Chris Watts? The official record shows he's considered a model inmate by prison standards. He follows the rules most of the time. He does his assigned job. He participates in available programs. He stays out of major trouble. By the metrics that prison administrators use to evaluate inmates, he's doing everything right. But does that mean he's genuinely changed as a human being? That's so much harder to answer with any certainty. He still mops floors and performs janitorial duties for 12 cents an hour. Still spends 23 hours every day locked in his tiny cell. Still writes letters to people on the outside world. Still attends Bible study sessions twice a week. Still quotes scripture and talks about being forgiven by God. His daily routine hasn't changed significantly since he first arrived at Dodge Correctional. Same small cell. Same boring, repetitive meals. Same crushing isolation. Same endless hours with nothing but his thoughts for company. But something has definitely shifted in recent months. More people have been writing to him than ever before. Ever since various documentaries brought the case back into the public consciousness, his mailbox has been fuller than it's been in years. Some of those letters are supportive. Some are filled with hatred and anger. Some are simply curious, asking questions about what happened and why. And he responds to many of them. Still desperately trying to connect with the outside world. Still trying to be understood. That isolation? It's total. Complete. Absolute. And it will never, ever end. He'll spend the next 40 years, maybe 50 if he lives that long, in that exact same routine. Same cell. Same prison. Same life. Until the day his heart stops beating. And when that day eventually comes, probably nobody will notice except for a small mention buried in the news. One more inmate died in prison. One more person who spent decades behind bars paying for their crimes. So has prison changed Chris Watts? Has he become a different person? Ask 10 different people and you'll get 10 completely different answers. Some will say yes, absolutely. That 7 years of forced reflection, faith, and isolation have genuinely transformed him. That the man he is today is fundamentally different from the man who committed those unspeakable acts in 2018. Others will say no, absolutely not. That real change is impossible for someone who did what he did. That claiming to be different doesn't make it true. That he simply learned how to survive in prison, nothing more. that it's all manipulation and performance. And maybe, just maybe, the truth exists somewhere in between those two extremes. Maybe he has changed in some ways but not others. Maybe parts of him feel genuine remorse while other parts still don't fully understand or accept the complete impact of his choices. What we know for absolute certain is this: every morning he wakes up in that cell. Every night he goes to sleep knowing he'll never leave. Every day is exactly the same as the one before and the one that will come after. That's his reality. That's his life. That's what justice looks like for Christopher Watts. Whether it's enough punishment, whether it's too much, whether it serves any constructive purpose beyond simple punishment and revenge. Those are questions we all have to answer for ourselves based on our own values and beliefs. The system has decided that he will spend every remaining day of his life locked away from society, isolated from human connection, living with the constant knowledge of what he did and what he lost. Is that sufficient? Is that too lenient? Is that too harsh? Those answers depend entirely on your perspective, your experiences, and what you believe justice should accomplish. Some argue that keeping him alive in prison for decades serves no purpose. That the cost to taxpayers, the ongoing trauma for the victim's family, and the lack of any meaningful rehabilitation make life imprisonment pointless. They believe certain crimes are so heinous that the only appropriate response is the ultimate punishment. Others argue that execution would be too easy, too quick. That living with his actions for 50 years, waking up every single day in that cell, never experiencing freedom or joy again, never being able to undo what he did, that's the real punishment. That's the suffering he's earned. And then there are those who believe in the possibility of redemption, who think that if he genuinely changes, if he spends the rest of his life helping others avoid making similar choices, if he uses his experience to prevent future tragedies, then maybe, just maybe, his continued existence serves some purpose. I'm not here to tell you which perspective is correct. I'm here to give you the facts, to show you what's really happening, and to let you draw your own conclusions. But through all of this discussion about Chris Watts and his life in prison, we can never, ever lose sight of the people who matter most. Shanann Watts was 34 years old when she died. She was a devoted mother, a loving wife who tried desperately to save her marriage, and an expectant mother preparing to welcome her son into the world. She posted on social media about her love for her family. She worked hard to provide for her daughters. She had dreams and plans and a future that was stolen from her. Bella was 4 years old. Just 4 years old. She loved unicorns and princesses. She was starting to read. She had her whole life ahead of her. Every birthday she'd never celebrate. Every school dance she'd never attend. Every friend she'd never make. Every dream she'd never pursue. All of it, taken away in a moment of unspeakable violence. Celeste was 3 years old. 3. She loved her big sister. She loved to dance. She had her mother's smile. And like her sister, she had a lifetime of possibilities that will never be realized. A life that ended before it truly began. And Nico. Baby Nico, who never got to take a single breath. Who never got to open his eyes and see his mother's face. Who never got to feel his sister's hugs or hear his father's voice. A child who existed only as potential, as hope, as the future that Shanann was carrying inside her. These are the people we need to remember. These are the lives that were destroyed. These are the victims of Christopher Watts' actions. Not him. Not his struggles. Not his isolation or his loneliness or his supposed transformation. Them. Always them. And this brings us back to where we started. Those mysterious visitors. The ones that the new prison administration just banned. Who were they? What did they want? What information were they seeking or trying to suppress? The speculation ranges from the mundane to the bizarre. Some believe they were journalists trying to get exclusive interviews. Others think they were true crime enthusiasts, obsessed fans who romanticize killers. Still others suggest something darker, connections to organized crime or secretive groups with their own agendas. The truth is we don't know. The prison officials aren't talking. Chris Watts isn't saying anything publicly. And without more information we're left with nothing but questions. But here's what we do know. Something was happening that the new administration deemed inappropriate enough to shut down immediately. Something that violated protocols or raised red flags serious enough to warrant a complete ban on these visits. That alone tells us this wasn't innocent. This wasn't just regular visitor activity. This was something more. Something wrong. Something that needed to stop. And the fact that it was happening at all raises even more disturbing questions. How did these visitors get approved in the first place? Who authorized their access? Were guards being bribed? Were officials being manipulated? Was there corruption within the prison system that allowed this to continue? This situation with Chris Watts, it raises bigger questions about our entire criminal justice system. What do we do with people like him? How do we punish them? How do we ensure they can never harm anyone else while also maintaining some basic standard of human decency in how we treat even the worst criminals? How do we balance the victims' families' needs for justice with society's obligation to avoid becoming monsters ourselves in how we respond to monstrous acts? How do we prevent corruption within prisons? How do we ensure that inmates are being monitored appropriately, they don't have simple answers. And reasonable people can disagree on what the right approach should be. But there are questions we need to be asking. Questions we need to be discussing. Questions that affect not just Chris Watts, but every person in our prison system and everyone affected by their crimes. I'll be honest with you. Working on this investigation, diving deep into this case, it's taken a toll on me. Every time I read another document about what happened to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, I think about my own children. The ones I lost. The pain that never goes away. Every time I see photos of those beautiful little girls, I imagine what they could have become. The women they would have grown into. The lives they could have lived. And every time I think about Chris Watts sitting in that cell, I struggle with conflicting emotions. Part of me feels nothing but rage. Pure anger at what he did and how he continues to try to justify it or explain it away. But another part of me, the part that's had to examine the darkest corners of human behavior in case after case, wonders about the complexity of it all. The psychological factors. The circumstances. Not as excuses, never as excuses, but as pieces of a larger puzzle about how ordinary people sometimes do horrific things. That's not sympathy. It's not compassion for him specifically. It's an attempt to understand so that maybe, somehow, we can prevent the next tragedy. The next family destroyed. The next children killed by someone they trusted. Closing. Thank you for watching this deep, detailed investigation into Chris Watts' current life behind bars in 2026. If this video made you think about something differently, if it showed you information you didn't know before, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who's interested in true crime and wants to understand the complete story. And subscribe to True Crime Cellblock for more thoroughly researched investigations into cases that absolutely shook the world. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Has prison changed him? Does it even matter if it has? Should we care about what happens to people after they're locked away forever? Should we have any compassion for their mental state and suffering? I genuinely want to hear your thoughts on these difficult questions. And please always remember something crucial. This isn't about glorifying what happened. This isn't about making entertainment out of tragedy. It's about understanding the complete story. The before, the during, and the after. Because that's the only way we truly learn anything meaningful. That's the only way we make sense of things that seem completely senseless. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and never, ever forget the real victims in cases like these. The innocent ones whose voices were silenced. The ones who can't tell their own stories anymore. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, Nico. They mattered. They still matter. And they always will. I'll see you in the next investigation. This is Liam Oliver, True Crime Cellblock.